Okay, so we've created our project we're going to be saving into. So now I'm going to show you how to set up your engineering config, and I'll be showing you all the menus within the engineering config. So to get out of the filing system menu, if you press up, keep pressing it, you will always get back to the startup menu. Now, purposely, we have hidden the engineering config for safety purposes in this default menu. You can see down here, engineering config. I'm just going to explain briefly what the default menu is doing. So in here, you can select, or you can tell the cooler what config files load up upon startup. So if you've powered down your power up, it will automatically log in how and boot up configuration files how you want it. And simply, I can tell it which project I want. I can say which engineering config. So you just select engineering from here and select the files. Same with user and the startup gmems. In this menu, you can also apply factory defaults to the ME, user config, engineering config, and panel config. So this will wipe the system back to how it come out of the factory. Also here, you'll see this panel auto connect. In here, is basically telling the panel which mainframe to automatically log in. You can disable it so that you physically have to log in, or you can set it to be the first mainframe found, last used mainframe, or you can set a preferred mainframe. And then when it all starts up, it logs into the system, the switcher, and also will load the files you've told it to. Okay, also in the defaults menu is where you can log off the mainframe if you need to. So now we're going to go into the engineering config. What I would usually do when I'm commissioning a system, I would start with the system standard menu here. The system standard menu is where you set the standard of the system. So simply in the top left, I can select this. I can either press this pop-up, select if I want it to be SD, HD, and 1080p standards, or I can cycle through here and then select what you need, press apply. Both ways of doing it. Also in the system stand menu is you enable your Genlock reference. So here there is an off button, but you want to make sure this is on, and then this menu here is giving you a status. So in my case, it's telling me the Genlock's locked and everything's present. And it will also give you the frame rate of your back and burst or tri-level sync or whatever you're using. Also in here, a set to default is actions on next field. That's just basically saying it's going to do the cuts, etc. on the next field. I think 99 times out of 100 it will always be set to this, but if you're ever doing any specific editing stuff, you could tell it to be on field 1 or field 2. But like I said, it's mainly going to be on action on the next field. Okay, so now I'm going to go back to the start, or the far left of the engineering menu, is input setup. So here is where I set up all my inputs. You'll have a list here of my 36 inputs. As default, it will tell you when there's no video present, and it will also tell you if there's like a wrong standard coming in. But here you can see that I have some 1080i signals coming in. So in this input menu, you can name the inputs. So if I wanted to name input 1, I can double tap this and I could say, for example, cam 1. And it will change the name to be cam 1. Also here you'll see UHD input. Now this is grayed out, it's because in the mainframe config it's set to HD, it's not UHD. But if it was in UHD, I could turn that to yes, and as you can see, it's grouped my inputs 1, 2, 3 and 4, so my 4 quads to be 4K UHD. Simple as that. Okay, the next one is the router override option. Now, as default, this is set to no, But if you have specific inputs coming in via a router, and you want that router or control device to control the naming, so it could have camera 1 routed to that input, but then the next day or the next minute it could have camera 2, 3, 4, so you want the mnemonic display to update accordingly. So this is where you set router override to yes for the inputs you need to be controlled. Now that will allow a router control device to name those mnemonics. Use default standard. This is normally set to yes, so it would always look for the default standard coming in. But if you knew a source was going to be SD, for example, and it would always be SD, I could say no, scroll down or up till I find, in my case, SD 16:9, and hit apply standard. Now that input, in my case here, input 5, will always be looking for SD. As you can see here, it's telling me it's a wrong standard. But majority of the time, we have something called auto standard, which also looks, see what's coming in, and it will up, down convert accordingly. So I would set use default to no, auto standard to on. And then it will auto detect the inputs coming in. You see now, it's changed that back to 1080i 5994, what is coming in. Okay. Also in the menu, in the input setup menu, you've got Hank and Vank ancillary data. So these default set to on. As you can see in this table, you can see it there. But you can manually turn off the data just by saying no, no. So that means if you have embedded audio that you really don't want to pass through, then you can block it off right at the input stage. So, but as default, these are set to yes. And that's about it for the input setup menu. You have timing values here. So you can see every input as coming in and the timing of those sources. Okay, so this brings me on to the output setup menu. So in this menu, I'll be configuring from an engineering perspective all of the outputs. So in here I can select each of my 18 outputs. I can cycle through there. I can pop up and press 18 or the number I like. So in this menu here, if I want to, I can name them. So in here, this one's named Program, PGM. I can enable or inhibit my SMPTE payload. And then, just like the input stage, if you have specific outputs that you absolutely do want Hank and Vank data, you can select these to be on, off as necessary. Opposite to the inputs, these are defaulted to all be off. So if you know on output 1 you definitely want ancillary data, then I'm going to be turning them on. Okay. Also in here is output assignment usage. Now, as default, all of your outputs will be set to aux outputs. So that means in another menu you can assign what you want to those auxes. If you want one output to be one of your 4 multi-viewer heads, then you simply select the output and you turn the multi-viewer head on. So I have output 4, multi-viewer head 1. That could be 2, 3, 4. When it's set to normal, it will go back to its aux output number. So 4 to 4. I'm going to have multi-viewer head 1 on there. Okay, this brings me on to the UHD outputs. Now this is grayed, just like the input, because this system, this mainframe is set to a 2ME SDHD system. But if I'd set it to a 1ME UHD system, then I could select, say, output 1 and turn that to be a UHD output on. So, as you can see, it's grouped my 1, 2, 3 and 4 as my 4 quads. So that would be, say, my first 4K output. Okay, the next part of this menu is tally. Now it's important to know, in Cooler, you tally a physical output, and then whatever is assigned to that output will give you the tally. So in my case now, I know I have a program output on my output one. So I have put tally now to on for that. And also preview, tally, next to on. Also in Kuler, we have isolation tallies. So if you say you had a world feed or you had an ME going to be recorded into a server, for example, and you wanted a different tally to your main program red tally, then I could assign, say, I don't know, my clean feed, I could say, I want isolation tally 1 to be on. Now that's telling me when I cut along this bank, for example, if this was assigned to that output, then it will give an isolated tally that's different to the main tally output. Okay, also in the output setup menu is the number of DSKs you want on your outputs. So, as standard, you get 1 downstream keyer, but it's important to know that when you want to enable more, then this changes your outputs 18, 17, 16, 15, 14, and 13 to be inputs. For example, if I change this now to be 2, if you notice, it's turned output 17 and 18 to be inputs 37 and 38. Again, if I go and enable 3 DSKs, it's gone up to 16 and 15. Okay, I'll put this back to 1.